3PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. On this episode, I have Mark Anthony, psychic explorer, also known as a psychic lawyer. He's a fourth-generation psychic medium who communicates with spirits. Mark, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Adam. Thank you for having me on 3PNR.
I got to tell you, the amount of credentials you have, impressive.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It was a lot of work, but a lot of fun along the way too.
Yeah, to become a lawyer, that's no easy feat. That requires time, patience, and study.
It does, and because originally, both my parents had mediumistic abilities, and it runs in my family for generations. And my dad was a U.S. Navy SEAL and a NASA engineer. So it's not like, my parents were going around wearing turbans, waving Ouija boards. Right. We were, for all essential purposes, the all-American family next door. My mother was a commercial artist and an illustrator. And so Dad got out of the Navy and he was at a dance and he met my mother. And he said that she just stood out in the crowd. He said she was real classy. My mom worked at a high-end department store, and Mom joked, and she said, I was 19, and your dad was treating me like I was 30 because she was dressed to the nines, because she got the employee discount for all the, real high-end designer clothes. And after a couple dates, she said, I've got to tell you something. She said, before we go any further and get to know each other any better, she said, I see spirits. And my dad goes, oh my God, I do too. And Adam, I researched this with my family and I found that it goes back, I can track it back into the 1890s on both sides of the family. And I'm assuming it probably goes further than that. And so it's what's known as a recessive genetic trait, which means that it can skip a generation or two, or right, that not everybody in the family has it. But when you have two parents with the same recessive genetic trait, then the odds of one of the children having that trait increases exponentially, and that would be me.
So you come from a pedigree.
I never heard it put like that, but
well, as you're explaining it, yes, in my mind, it's like this was you were meant to happen, right? So it's for me, it's a pedigree. It's remarkable.
Yeah, I think that people need to realize that everybody matters and everybody counts. Everybody has a purpose. We're all a piece of a bigger puzzle, and we're all good at different things. Some people are mediums and psychics and some people aren't, just like some people are Olympic athletes and some people aren't. Some people are mathematicians, some people aren't. And so we all have our parts to play, and, we're all good at different things.
I agree. I have a saying I go by. It's, if you want a religion, humanity. If you want a race, human. If you want a place of origin, Earth. It makes it real simple, as a species, treat one another as a species.
It'd be really nice if everybody would think that way.
I would love that.
Well, you look at the news and, you see China's doing this massive buildup, acquiring 1,000 nuclear warheads, making a massive navy. And it's like, okay, so the last 5,000 years of recorded history has taught us nothing. World War I and II, massive military buildups. And the problem now, Adam, is that people aren't, their religion isn't humanity. Their creed isn't, their race isn't human. It's still this us versus they. And the problem now is that we've developed weapons of such a magnitude that we can extinguish life as we know it on this planet. And I remember my dad, he worked with NASA and then he shifted into the defense industry. And he was telling me, he goes, Mark, inside of a half hour, the United States and Russia can launch enough nuclear weapons to incinerate this planet. And the parts that don't get incinerated directly are going to be consumed by by radiation.
Yeah.
And so all we see is, all these countries, they have to acquire nuclear weapons. And for what purpose? And if our history teaches us anything, it's that humans resort to violence much faster than they resort to discussion, to negotiations, and to taking the high road. And I'm praying that it doesn't go in the direction that I'm afraid it will.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. We have more reasons to divide than we do to come together, whether it be, religion or politics or some other ideology. It's insane. For people to find peace here, I think it's going to take the threat, and I hate to say it this way, but a greater threat to us, right? Not in the form of a virus either. Something that would, let's say hypothetically, aliens show up, and they're not here.
I was thinking the same thing, but a couple weeks back when William Shatner, aka Captain Kirk, okay, so he goes up in the Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos's project. It was so amazing to see his reaction when he said that, here we are, this guy that's played Captain Kirk for all these years, and he broke down and wept, and he said it was so beautiful to see how thin the blue barrier around Earth is. And you look at Earth and there's life, and then you look at space into the void and there's death. And in the course of my life, I've been honored to I met Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, the first two men to walk on the moon. I also met astronaut John Glenn. I met Bill Nelson, who was a politician that was on one of the space shuttles, and now he is head of NASA. And I met, it was funny how I met this guy. I was at a diner, and because I lived not too far from Kennedy Space Center, and there was this guy, and he looked like he was with his wife and his mom, and he had the coolest NASA jacket like I've ever seen. Like, that is the best NASA jacket ever. That's amazing. I said, the space shuttle landed yesterday. Did you see it land? And he looks me right in the eye and he goes, I landed it. And then I realized, oh my God, it's Captain Mike Foreman. That's insane. And here he is at this restaurant that specializes in blueberry muffins, and it's hilarious because people go to this place, but all the astronauts that I've spoken to, and I remember I had a fairly decent conversation with John Glenn. And for the benefit of your listeners who may not be aware, John Glenn was the first man to orbit the Earth. The Russians had sent up, Yuri Gagarin, and then we had Alan Shepard, and they went into space and down, but John Glenn actually was the first to orbit the Earth. And then in, I guess it was the 1990s, John Glenn went back into space. He was 70, either 70 or 76. I don't remember exactly. And at that time, he was the oldest person to go in orbit. Now it's William Shatner, Captain Kirk, age 90. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. I know him as Denny Crane, though.
Denny Crane, yeah, I liked him as Denny Crane. But I talked to John Glenn, and I said, what was it like? He said, Mark, when you look down and see how beautiful Earth is and how alive it is, you just look down and it's pulsating with life. He said, and then you realize this is the only place we have to live. And it's funny because Neil Armstrong said something similar. So did Buzz Aldrin. They all do. And the reason I'm bringing this up is maybe right now it's all really rich people going into space, but maybe the more people that are going into space and getting that perspective, it's this whole I have to conquer you. And when you realize that we're really a very small speck, and it's wonderful that Elon Musk wants to go to Mars and build a Mars, base and all that. But Mars, the atmosphere is so thin, it's unbreathable for humans. It would have to be some type of underground base or a dome, and oxygen would have to be manufactured. When humanity finally realizes that this planet is the only place we have to live, and that we are destroying it and have the capacity to destroy it, when that happens, that's when things are going to change. And I like what you said, if there's an external threat. Well, we know now because the Pentagon,
Yep.
the U.S. government, other governments have said UFOs are real, but we don't know what they are. And I'm sure you've interviewed a number of people, and I know the former head of the U.S. Army's UFO project, and I've actually interviewed and done readings for some very high-profile alien abductees. These things are real. There are other species visiting this planet, and it would appear that their intentions are not malevolent. Because if they were, I think we'd know it by now.
Oh, sure. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, if the Klingons or the Borg, showed up, I think we'd know it, or the Dominion. I think we'd know it. But then again, we don't. So anyway, we kind of got off track.
No, listen, this is perfect. Again, keep in mind, we're sitting down having coffee somewhere. That's
right.
Yeah. I recently I've spoken to some people in the afterlife business. Some of the things that grab me in life, and I said this before, when you look at the images of the cosmic web and how everything's connected, and it's the sheer size of it puts people in perspective, right?
Yes.
And for me, when I see that, there's no doubt there's other life. There's definitely something after here, right? Because it's all connected by this web, and that web, it's a beautiful thing to see that, and it really is humbling at the same time. So
it is.
For me, if I had to, and I don't, maybe your perspective or the thoughts of others, because I grew up in a Catholic home, and I kind of lost that in my 20s because I came to the realization this is a control factor, right? This is people controlled by fear, and rightfully, I respect religion. Let's be honest. If you didn't have like that threat of a nasty afterlife, what stops you from killing John next door?
Right. I mean, exactly. And the problem is that people confuse religion with God, and as a psychic medium, I communicate with spirits. I've conducted over 15,000 readings for people, and in each reading, more than one spirit comes through. So I've probably interfaced with the better part of 100,000 spirits in my life. And that's a lot. I mean, when I think about that, it's kind of mind-boggling.
I don't even want to talk to that many people on a given day.
Well, the spirits are... They're easier to get along with.
I would imagine.
Because they don't have our egoistic and our limited finite perspective.
Or our impulses and chemicals.
Impulses. But God is real. But, God is not some neurotic white guy sitting on a throne with a scepter smiting people. That's medieval and dark ages imagery. And like you said, fear of a nasty afterlife to frighten people into just, being nice and being decent. And I believe, as Nikola Tesla did, that what one person calls God, another calls the laws of physics. And you mentioned something earlier about the cosmic web, how everything is interconnected. And we know that everything is energy. And on the subatomic level, you go from molecules to atoms to electrons, protons, and neutrons to the smaller particles, the smallest being quantum, which is pure electromagnetic energy. And that, for all intents and purposes, everything on the subatomic level is the same energy. Well, this makes a lot of sense because when you look at God always was, always will be, and God is interconnected and knows what's happening everywhere. So if everything is this interconnected energy, the question is there a centralized form of intelligence flowing through it? And I believe that there is. But, it's easier for us. But that's also asking people to grasp the concept of infinity, which the human brain simply is not designed to understand. And so that's why people create religions, because it's easier for somebody to relate to God in the form of a person, whether it's Jesus or Shiva or Vishnu or Amarasu or, whatever form that you want to create. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, because, we're still acknowledging that we are part of something which is much greater, and that we can communicate with and receive messages from this eternal, infinite intelligence.
I agree with you. And it's going to take the evolution of mind. For me, so people are going to hear this podcast. This podcast is 2 months old. It's unadvertised. It's gaining traction on word of mouth. Over time, the things I think are going to evolve because I'm speaking to you. I'm going to learn something new. I'm going to speak to someone else. I'm going to learn. You have to be able to evolve, because if you don't do it, if you approach everything with filters on, you're going to miss things, and it's unfortunate when you miss things. There's something grander out there that's outside of our phone. It's not on a TV, and it's a part of nature, and you got to open your eyes to everything in every aspect. I doubt nobody or nothing. I don't know enough to do so in the first place. So for me to evolve my mind to be a better person and a better student of life, I have to hear it all and absorb it all. And I can't cast opinions, because opinions are still just my own thought. All right. I speak in theory a lot, and that's because a lot of this interest comes from my childhood. I have a curiosity of UFOs, ghosts, and psychics, and it's all really fascinating. But the better part of that curiosity, and I've said this before too in other podcasts, today's science is yesterday's theory. And yesterday's theory is the curiosity of a child fueled by imagination.
Exactly. And that's funny, because that's one of the things that I talk about in my new book, The Afterlife Frequency, is that the science fiction of today becomes the science fact of tomorrow, which is essentially what you just said.
Right.
And, in 1926, Nikola Tesla, he was being interviewed for a couple different magazines, and he said that with advances in television and telephony, and television at that time was strictly a theory, but they were playing around with it, they had electronics in the 1920s. He said eventually the entire world will become a universal brain, and that will not only be able to talk to each other through technology, but able to see each other, and with a device small enough to fit in a man's breast pocket.
Yeah.
He was talking about a cell phone.
Right, exactly.
Decades before there was even the technology to begin to create such a thing. And so he was one of those visionaries, and that was looked at as science fiction, fantasy, pseudoscience. And yet today, a cell phone is a fact of life. I remember when I met George Takei, who played Mr. Sulu on Star Trek, and we were talking, and he said that he said, I look at Star Trek and there's the communicator. And he said, now it's one of the most annoying things of the 21st century.
Yeah, that's true.
Cell phone.
Yeah. When you think about it, that's absolutely true. My goodness. It's, for me, I want the lightsaber. We're past due. We're past due. I get that, how hard that would be. I understand it, because if you light it up, it's light. It'll travel indefinitely, right? So, but it's still a fascinating thing to think about.
Certainly, it is, and so what I've done in my work, I've traveled all over the world. I've studied different religions. I study archaeology. I study humanity. I study quantum physics, and this all comes from my background as an attorney, because throughout my career, I was a prosecutor, a criminal defense attorney, civil litigation. I specialized in head injury litigation. So I had to work with neuroscientists. I had to work with psychologists, with medical doctors, with forensics, with physicists, with ballistics, with chemists, in addition to criminologists. And so that's the kind of the cool thing about laws. It puts you in everything, which is funny, because it's a line from that movie, The Devil's Advocate, where Al Pacino's the head of this law firm, but he's actually the devil. And Keanu Reeves is this, young man that he's kind of pulling into the law firm. And Keanu Reeves is, why the law? And Al Pacino's like, because it puts you in everything. The way Al Pacino does that. And it's true. I mean, Adam, can you think of any facet of what we do that doesn't have some form of legal regulation?
Nothing.
I mean, even the drywall that's put on our walls. I mean, the internet that we're using, the clothes that we wear, the food that we eat. You know, on one hand, maybe it's bad. On the other hand, maybe it's good. Maybe it's good there's an FDA, Food and Drug Administration, so the water we drink isn't poisonous.
It's true.
So the thing is, it gave me this background. And then when I was working with head injury cases, I had to study the human brain. Well, being a medium, I communicate with spirits. And so I started pulling everything together. And it was part of the reason I wrote my new book, The Afterlife Frequency, because I realized that every belief system, whether it's the Hindus of ancient India, the Buddhists, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, Islam, Native American beliefs, African animistic beliefs, Japanese Shintoism. You look at all of it, and there's the belief that the soul, who and what we are, which can also be referred to as a spirit, and in realms of psychology and science is known as consciousness, that it pre-exists the body, comes into the body, and then moves on after the body. Now, neuroscience is the study of the human brain. And neuroscientists, we know that the brain has an electromagnetic field. Our whole body does, but there's an extremely sophisticated electrical field is in our brain. But neuroscientists have no idea how the brain creates consciousness, because it doesn't. Right. The brain operates on chemical reactions and electrical impulses, but neuroscience is completely at a loss to explain how the brain creates consciousness. So with recent developments in quantum physics, there are quantum physicists who say that, like Michio Kaku, one of the developers of string theory, say that eternal life does not violate the laws of physics. And then when you have Professor Hans-Peter Dorff from the Max Planck Institute in Germany saying that the brain is like a computer hard drive, and that the hard drive, the brain, did not create the programs, the consciousness on it, it merely hosts it. So after years of examination, thousands of readings, I developed the term the electromagnetic soul. And this is one of the new theories and new terms that I put forth in my book, The Afterlife Frequency. And I use the term the electromagnetic soul to describe what we really are, which is pure consciousness that is eternal electromagnetic energy. So that the EMS, the electromagnetic soul, pre-exists the body, comes into the body. When the brain-body hard drive crashes, dies, our EMS, our electromagnetic soul, doesn't die with it. It merely moves on. And what it does is it plunges into this eternal sea of consciousness, like a drop of water plunging into the ocean. And that's the afterlife frequency. So my book, The Afterlife Frequency, explains the different forms of spirit communication, whether it's through a medium like myself or whether you've had a direct experience, maybe in a dream, or you catch a glimpse of a loved one out of your peripheral vision, or you feel their presence, or someone has a near-death experience. Then there's also a deathbed vision, which becomes oftentimes a shared death experience where somebody who's terminally ill is talking about seeing spirits of their loved ones, and people in close proximity, family, friends, hospice workers, healthcare workers, also see those. And out-of-body experiences where people's consciousness actually leaves their body, that these have all been traditionally regarded as separate phenomenon, and they're not. And that's why I developed the term, the EMS, the electromagnetic soul, and that's why I wrote The Afterlife Frequency, to explain that all of these have a common denominator, which is energy transfer and frequency alignment.
I think I'm going to give you a prediction for me. That book's going to prove valuable in the future. I tell you why that is. There's companies that are currently working to map the brain, right? That their goal is to upload and download consciousness to the best of their ability anyhow. But what you said computes to me. If you think about what our brain is, it's part of our body being the machine, our brain being the computer. And if what they're attempting to do by remapping and uploading, downloading consciousness, as you said, your soul, or therefore your consciousness, is using this vessel currently. And when this car is no longer viable to drive, It's time to move to the next car. So
Exactly.
I think science is going to hear something that you wrote, and they're going to find something, and they're going to see one and the same. And I think your book, I think, is going to eventually become part of Science Fact eventually.
Well, there's a lot of science fact in it, and I am presenting new theories to describe different aspects of spirit communication. That's why this differs from books written by other mediums, is because this is a serious work of science. And I've been very humbled and honored that it's endorsed by some of the top afterlife research experts, near-death experience researchers, and survival of consciousness scientists in the world. And, you know, when they're agreeing with and endorsing my theories, you know, it's, like I said, it's very humbling. It's very much of an honor. But I know that this is on the right track. And it's time for people to understand this. And also to realize that faith and science should not be mutually exclusive. And that what people of faith have been saying about the soul pre-existing the body, coming into the body, and then departing to a higher realm, a higher frequency, if you will, after physical death, I think it's important to understand this. And I think it's time for people of faith, religions, to start letting go of the mythological constructs and be more open to scientific explanations which coincide with their beliefs. And I think it's time for the scientific world to stop looking at people who believe in an afterlife and in a divine power as nothing more than wallowing in primitive, superstitious, mythological constructs.
Right. That also benefit them in a sense of control. For kids that are going to listen, or for people that want to, let me dumb it down, how he's describing it, I both admire, respect, and I really can't wait to be a part of that. I'm going to read the book now. I have to. So here's how it goes. When your Xbox is breaking and you need a new one, you take your data, you upload it to a cloud, you get the new Xbox, and you put your data there, and it's still you. It's just a new Xbox. Right?
There you go.
And so that's the simplest way I could put that for people. And I really, really stand behind that. That's out of everyone I've spoken to thus far, that holds the most weight with me by a mile.
Well, you know, I've been working toward this my entire life. And if you'll indulge me, there's been a number of reasons, a number of aha enlightenment moments throughout my life. But the best friend that I ever had, his name was Billy. And he was in my last book, Evidence of Eternity, and I wrote about him here in the Afterlife Frequency too. In fact, chapter 1 starts with, I'll call it an adventure in Bangkok. And let me tell you, if things had gone just a little bit differently, I would not be here speaking to you. I'm pretty sure I'd be dead. And he was the best friend that I ever had. We met when we were 11. We went to junior high, high school, college together. And then after college, I went to law school, and he went to Asia, and he learned how to speak Japanese, Cantonese, Thai, and Indonesian. And so he was teaching Japanese executives conversational English. So anyway, I went to Asia, spent about 2 months, and God, we had this incredible time in Japan and Southeast Asia, traveling all over the place. I even performed his wedding ceremony. He met this incredible woman in Japan, and I'll never forget it, Adam. There I was. I'm standing there, and I'm performing the wedding ceremony for my best friend. And I'm looking at the crowd, and my parents, they were alive then. His parents were alive then. All of our friends from college, high school, everybody in my life that mattered to me was there. You know, and it really doesn't get any better than that. It was one of those shining, sparkling points of light. And the thing about Billy is, you know, even if we didn't see each other for a year or so, it was just like yesterday when I saw him. And it would take too long to go into the reasons why, but he succumbed to suicide about 3 years after his wedding. And needless to say, I was devastated.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, the thing about Billy is that our entire lives, we had this ongoing discussion about the afterlife. and he didn't believe in it. He was an atheist, and he said that, I don't know how you do the psychic thing, but you always get me wondering, because especially when we're in Asia, I'm talking to all the Buddhist monks, and I was going to the temples and praying with them and all this. And so we had this, it wasn't an argument, it was an ongoing intellectual debate. And I remember he said, there's no science to prove this. There's no technology that can tune into this other side thing you talk about. So about a year and a half after he died, I was one of the headline speakers at a paranormal conference at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, which is really cool. And if you ever get a chance, everyone should go to the Stanley Hotel. It's beautiful, but a lot of paranormal activity. And
I've heard of it, actually. And I'm from a couple of paranormal people I'd spoken to. And I'm definitely, eventually, like I was telling you, I'm going to do a documentary. That's on the list. Oh,
yeah. Yeah, definitely. The Stanley. So I had just given my presentation, and so I went and I was signing books. I was autographing my first book, Never Letting Go, had just come out. And all the paranormal investigators, a lot of guys from TV were there. So my manager, she travels with me, Rocky, and she figured, okay, Mark, you got this under control. So she's walking around in the convention hall looking at all this equipment that the paranormal investigators were displaying. And she's walking by this one table, and this guy named Chris he was displaying the spirit box scanner, and she walks by and she hears, "Get Mark." And Rocky stops, and she's looking at this thing, and she looks at Chris. She goes, "Did you hear that?" And all of a sudden it says again, "Get Mark." And Chris is like, "Do you think he means you're Mark Anthony?" So all of a sudden I hear, Mark, get over here. And I'm looking up and I'm like, what's going on? And they're waving to me and people are like crowding around this table. So I get up and I run over there. And before I could say anything, as soon as I approach the table, I hear, "Dude." And I stop. Adam, my heart almost stopped. And I looked at this thing and I looked at Rocky, and then it comes and I hear, "Love you, bro." And yeah. Rocky's tears are streaming out of her eyes. She goes, "Mark, that voice." I go, "That's Billy." She goes, "It is," because she knew him too. And then it filled with static. And the investigator's like, "Oh my God, it not only called Mark by name, but both of you positively identified the voice." He goes, "This is very, very unusual." And I'm like almost ready to fall down, And because one of the last things, Adam, that he ever said to me was, "Love you, bro."
Yep.
And see, because we're from a surfing culture in Central Florida, and it was always dude, bro. That's how we talk to each other. Well, after the initial, "Oh my God, I can't believe this happened," I started thinking, and I said, "Wait a second. This is what I have termed in the Afterlife Frequency, spiritual synchronicity." This was more than just Billy wanting to make contact with me. He said, "There's no technology that can tune into the other side. There's no science that can prove this." So what did the spirit, the electromagnetic soul of my best friend, the atheist, choose?
He acknowledged it.
Technology. Yep. He came to me through a technological device.
That's remarkable. Man.
And that got the wheels turning. And that's one of the things that led to me writing this book, because I had to explain in scientific terms, not some woohoo granola, "Oh, life in spirit told me, this in spirit told me." None of that. Okay. I had to explain, I'm a lawyer, okay? And I just don't accept anything. I need to do my research, my study, my facts, my evidence to explain to people that things like this that happen to me, that near-death experiences, shared death experiences, deathbed visions, communication through a medium, out-of-body experiences are real, how they happen, why they happen, and where they happen. And so that resulted in me writing The Afterlife Frequency.
I think that book's I tell you now, I think that's a game changer. I'm really happy about it. Just everything I've heard so far computes with me. And something you just said, I had Dylan Jones from the UK as a parapsychologist. He said the same thing. When he approaches the paranormal, he says, "Can I take this to court?" The way he phrased that, right? So what you just said made sense to me.
Oh, sure. And here, the thing is, a lot of people contact me and they're like, oh, I want you to take my case. For the record, I'm no longer taking cases. I've devoted my life to my spiritual work. Now, I maintain my certifications. I'm a member of the Florida Bar, the Washington, D.C. Bar, and the United States Supreme Court bars. I got my degree from Mercer University in Georgia, which included the study of law at Oxford University in England. And, since that time, I've studied and I've lectured at Brown, Columbia, Harvard, Yale, the Yavapai College. I've been a headline speaker of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, the Sedona Spirit Symposium, the Vail Symposium, and I could go on, but I've devoted my work to the spiritual, yet explainable through the scientific. And the time for this is now. We're in the 21st century now.
Yeah.
We have miraculous technology. We were talking before about Nikola Tesla and a cell phone. Well, do you think you could possibly get somebody in the year 1920 to understand a microwave oven?
No, to them, that's witchcraft. Yeah.
I stick in some popcorn and then magically it pops.
Yeah, if you went back in that time and pulled out a cell phone, they're going to burn you at the stake, period.
So, oh, my God, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Absolute witchcraft in their eyes.
Well, people like me have been treated horribly throughout the centuries, and even in some very religious countries in the Middle East.
I agree. You know what I didn't know?
Death.
I didn't realize this. Nostradamus wrote his quatrains the way he did to hide them from people. I never knew that. In fear of being persecuted.
Well, he had to negotiate with the around the Catholic Church, and it's funny because he also Nostradamus was an incredible psychic, and he was summoned to the court of King Henri II of France by the king's wife, Queen Catherine de Medici. Now, Catherine de Medici was just no regular queen. She was one of the richest women in Europe because she was of the famous de Medici family of Florence. They were the bakers. Yeah. They were the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers of medieval Europe. And she wanted to make sure that her children were going to, especially her son Philippe, to be the king of France. And he was kind of sickly. He was a sickly child. And Nostradamus was an amazing physician. He did not bleed his patients. And see, in the medieval era, George Washington was essentially bled to death. Got to get the bad blood out. They slice you open and think they're getting bad blood out. That was the norm, and Nostradamus thought it was ridiculous. He also believed in cleanliness, that his patients and he had to be clean. Also, he believed in cross-ventilation. While he may not have understood vitamins, he knew the importance of using rose hips to treat bubonic plague. And because rose hips are vitamin C.
Right.
And they were very effective in bubonic plague. So here he is in the court of Henry, and Catherine de Medici was really unhappy because Henry had a mistress, Diane de Poitiers, beautiful woman, but nonetheless, Catherine de Medici did not like her husband screwing around with Diane de Poitiers. Plus, this could be a potential risk to her children should she produce a child. So Nostradamus made a prediction that the younger lion shall surmount the older lion in a cage of gold, 2 wounds joined, and a death most cruel. Now, I'm paraphrasing the quatrain, and nobody understood what that meant at first. Well, Henri liked to joust. That was, the kingly sport. Right. And he was wearing the emblem of a lion, and he was 41, and his opponent was Captain Montgomery, who was, I think he was like 32, and who was also wearing the emblem of a lion. So he had 2 lions on a field, and the cage of gold. Well, Henri was wearing a gold-plated helmet. And so in the jousting match where they're charging it on horses at each other with their lances, there was an accident where Montgomery's lance hit Henri's shield, and a splinter went right into his eye and then into his brain. And Henri suffered horribly for 10 days before the infection overcame him. So Nostradamus's prediction came true, that the cage of gold, the two lions, a wound most cruel, and Catherine de' Medici then became regent of France. Captain Montgomery was immediately executed. Diane de Poitiers disappears from the pages of history. We can only imagine what happened to her.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah. And Philippe, the son of Catherine and Henri, became the king of France. You know, and it's really interesting because Nostradamus was practicing prophecy, which was banned by the Catholic Church, but he was under the protection of the most powerful woman in Europe, and he sort of negotiated his way around that. So Nostradamus is one of the most fascinating psychic figures in history, I think.
Yeah, imagine if they just would have approached him with an open mind. There'd still be a king alive, right?
Though there would, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, he forecasted that. Here, let's move to this, too. Think about the ancient Greeks.
Yes.
I'm fascinated by ancient Greece. And so I see all these wonderful inventions that they've had, and they were on the cusp of making legitimate clocks, functioning clocks, and computers in a sense. And then I remember asking, why did that stop? And then I found out why. Rome came in with Catholicism, and anything that they felt was that they were doing was, you know, basically witchcraft. And not in that term, but then they put it to a cease. We're 2,000 years behind the ball on technology. I say this a lot because it's so discouraging, you know?
It really is. Could you imagine if the Industrial Revolution had happened maybe in the 6th century?
Oh, my God. We'd be interplanetary already.
Yeah, we would. We would. Or if Leonardo da Vinci had been born 1,000 years earlier.
True. Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's a lot. Well, you know, you brought up ancient Greece. The Oracle of Delphi, or Delphi as my Greek friends, for 17 centuries, it was the spiritual epicenter of the ancient Mediterranean world. And it was a shrine to the god Apollo, the god of the sun, who was also the god of prophecy. And there were the priestesses of Apollo would sit on this tripod above a geothermal vent, and there'd be steam coming up out of the ground. Well, ancient descriptions said that the steam coming out of the ground had a sweet smell. It is believed that this could have been ethylene, and ethylene is caused by volcanic activity deep in the earth, which, you know, Greece is, you know, a very volcanically active area. And ethylene produces a mild hallucination.
Wow.
And so the priestesses would sit on this vent, and people would come. And all right, 1,700 years. We're talking everybody who was anybody in the ancient world. I mean, Alexander the Great was there, Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, Mark Antony, Hadrian, Trajan. I mean, all of them. All right, they were all there. They wanted the wisdom. And one of my favorite stories occurred in, let me see, it had to be about in the 6th century BC. King Croesus. King Croesus ruled what is now Turkey for the most part, and he was very concerned about the very aggressive and rapidly expanding Persian Empire, the Iranians. Okay, Iranians and Persians, one and the same. All right, and imagine, you know, Iran causing trouble in the Middle East, you know, 2,500 years ago. Well, they still are. Okay, but they were really, really causing it then. And so he went to the Oracle of Delphi for their wisdom. And the response was, if you attack the Persians, you will destroy a mighty empire. So Croesus gathered up an army, got the allies, got some Syrians, got the Egyptians, and they attacked the Persians. The Persians wiped the battlefield with him, annihilated his army, and conquered his kingdom.
Yeah, they had sheer numbers, too. That was an enormous empire.
Yes. Well, the prophecy came true. He attacked the Persians and destroyed a mighty empire, his own.
Yep.
So a generation or two later, not only did the Persians then swallow up Greece, then they crossed into what is now Bulgaria. and they were ready to mount an invasion, and they did mount a massive invasion against Greece. And they particularly had it out for the Athenians, because the city-state of Athens was always trying to undermine them, because Athens was real rich, and they hated Sparta too, because the Spartans had the best army, the Athenians had the best navy. And but the thing is, the Greeks could probably put maybe 20 to 25,000 men in the field, maybe 30, whereas the Persians could put like 150. Well, the Athenians, with Pericles as their leader, went to the Oracle of Delphi. And the oracle, the response was, Athens will be saved from behind wooden walls. So the Persian army invades Greece. We've probably all seen that movie 300, where the 300 Spartans were, doing the delay action. And eventually they were, but the Persians broke through and they headed straight to Athens, and they burned it to the ground. But they found that there was nobody there. The Athenians had evacuated the entire city, the whole population, to the island of Salamis. Meanwhile, the Persian navy, which was enormous, and because they had conscripted Phoenicians, which are Lebanese, Syrians, and Egyptian ships, they had this massive navy, and they were closing in on the Greek navy, which was maybe a fourth its size. Well, the Athenian commander knew the waters really well, and he lured them into this narrow channel off the island of Salamis. And the Persian ships began colliding with each other and running aground. And then the Athenians, using catapults with flaming projectiles, started picking them off and destroyed the Persian fleet. Well, this time, the oracle was interpreted correctly, because Athens was saved from behind wooden walls, which were ships, because the city of Athens didn't have wooden walls around it. Yep. And the Athenians realized it's our fleet. So they destroyed the Persian navy. Meanwhile, on the mainland of Greece, under Spartan command, the Persian army was destroyed at the Battle of Marathon. And the reason we have the marathon today and why it's 26 miles long is because the battle was won, and this young runner was sent to notify the Athenians. And he ran 26 miles nonstop, got there and said, "Victory is ours," and dropped dead.
That's there's been mediums all through history, but ignored, right? Should be what you would think it'd be more well documented. Even I'd spoken to a woman just recently. She was on the show, and she did astrology with the Reagans, Nancy and Ronald Reagan. And
Joan Quigley.
Yeah, you don't hear these names often, right? Circling back. So for you, at what point in your life did you know that you had this ability? When did you start realizing the gift was there?
Well, my parents saw it when I was 3.5, because I started talking to my invisible friends, except that they could see them too. And I remember the reaction. Mom was like, "Oh, he's got it." And Dad was like, "Oh. He's got it." Well, my dad was concerned. He was afraid that my life would be very, very difficult. Yeah. His own sister, Marjorie, he had 3 sisters, and one of them was a medium like he was, very highly gifted woman. And she was afraid most of her life. And she married this very religious guy. And he worked at this steel plant in Pennsylvania as a machinist. And one morning he's getting ready to go to work. And she begged him not to go to work because she had a premonition, a feeling something terrible would happen. They had a big argument. He decided to stay home. So that day, Adam, a crane was lifting thousands of pounds of steel beams, and the cable snapped, and it crushed the machine shop that he worked in, killed everybody in it.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so if he'd been at work, he would have died.
Yeah.
Well, he was a religious fanatic, and he felt that she was doing the work of Satan. And so he conspired with an unscrupulous psychiatrist, and they had Marjorie forcibly removed from her home and subjected involuntarily to electroshock therapy for over 6 months. It damaged her brain to the point where she never saw the future, never talked about spirits again.
Yeah, that's
And
unfortunate.
yeah,
You hear that, and the first thing in my mind is this. For people to have this gift, I try to explain it to myself, right? And so explaining to myself, my imagination takes over. You imagine your brain, again, this computer we still can't replicate today, as powerful as it can be. Who's to say what channels you are not opening? If you want proof of there being frequencies out there, get an ear infection and hear any sound, and you'll hear it 5 times more. You don't know the full capacity of your brain yet. It's not fair to judge people on that.
no, I mean, there's so much of it that we don't understand what it does. Where they say we use like maybe 10% of our brain. And that would be a good evolution. If humans are using 100% of their brain, maybe we wouldn't be behaving the way that we do. But the thing is, these abilities are real. And that's why I write about them.
Right.
And that's why I want to explain them in a logical fashion. It isn't magic. It isn't hocus pocus. It is explainable through quantum physics. And, I want to let everybody know that when they're reading my book, The Afterlife Frequency, when you hear quantum physics, please don't get scared off. I'm not going to subject you to a boring, dry treatise. I put up with enough of that in law school and in the practice of law, reading enough boring books. I explain things in a way that anybody can understand it, and then they're illustrated by stories that will relate, that you can relate to. And some of them are really intense. Some of them, should touch heartstrings, and some of them are funny. But everything there is for a reason, because it's important that we understand that the paranormal and the supernatural are actually a normal part of human nature. And it's time for us to let go of this fear, let go of this primitive, superstitious nonsense, and realize that these are merely an extension of our perceptive abilities. And when we employ, I put forth the RAF technique, a 4-step process, how to recognize the presence of spirits, accept the contact is real, feel it without overthinking it, and feeling it without fear, and then trust the message. And that's something that I teach people how to do in the book. This is not about turning everybody into a medium.
Right.
It's about everybody being able to recognize, accept, feel, and trust messages from spirits, because we all have the same physiology. There are glands within our body that enable us to do this. And when you start enhancing your spiritual situational awareness, you will benefit from the beautiful messages that are transmitted to us from spirits.
I agree. And for people that say, well, why just them? Why are they special? Okay, well, let me answer that. Why is everyone not 6'6" and dunking basketballs with big contracts? How many people out there could play pool like Shane Van Bonen? Everyone has a gift. And
everyone has a gift. And wouldn't it be boring if we were all the same?
Absolutely. Because the conversation we're having would go nowhere.
Yeah, we'd be like a school of fish. Same size, same color, same shape, same reaction.
Yeah, there'd be no podcast or TV because we'd all be like-minded. We wouldn't find any entertainment in any of it. And nor would we learn something from it. Nor would we feel something from it. You have to accept that people have gifts, period. And so for people like yourself that you're experiencing this, you could hear spirits. I think that's grand. Again, you can't point fingers at that because there's a guy out there that could dunk a basketball. There's another guy that could throw a fastball 100 miles an hour. Can everyone else do that? No, I know I can't.
No, I mean, look at the people that, I can bang around on a guitar, but I'm never going to be, a lead guitarist for a rock and roll band.
Right. Some people just have it. And in your case, you have it. I think your book is going to be a game changer personally, just based on the ideas and the theory and the construct. And then the know-how. And look, you're a smart guy. You have remarkable background, and you're very knowledgeable. No one can look at you and say, well, he's just doing this to sell a book. Nonsense. He's well-informed. He's educated. It's completely different than the guy who just said, I'm going to write a book that sounds like a great idea and accept it for what it is. Your book holds weight. And I personally think, like I said earlier, in the future, someone in science is going to read this like, wait a minute. This makes sense, especially for the soul and how the body obtains it. Personally, I think that's
well. They already have. I mean, the scientist who wrote the foreword is Dr. Gary Schwartz, who is head of the Soul Phone Project. He's actually working on technology to communicate with spirits, and he's head of psychology, parapsychology, physics, and surgery at the University of Arizona. And he endorsed the book, and so did Dr. Jeffrey Long, the head of the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, Dr. Bruce Grayson, one of the founders of IONS, Dr. Dean Radin, the chief scientist for the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and I could go on and on and on. But all of these scientists have endorsed the Afterlife Frequency because they feel that this is the book for our times that bridges the gap between the scientific and the spiritual. And you know, to put, you know, it took me 6 years to write the book and years to do the research because I take my time when I write it. And I want it to be easy for people to read, you know, because nothing's worse than when you're reading a dry scientific treatise.
Right.
I mean, there may be good information in there, but you know, I like to keep people engaged because that's how you learn. I mean, the best teachers, the best professors I ever had, they could take the most, what would seem to be boring subject and make it somehow interesting.
Yep, I agree with that. I had a teacher in grade school who would interact with you in a playful manner, and it stuck out with me forever. It was the best year. It was the best year of school I ever had. My mom noticed it. Grades were perfect because she made learning fun. And geography is not something as a kid you're like, well, I can't wait to go to geography, but she made it fun. You know, I mean, I agree with you. So here's another subject that I talked to the paranormal investigators about this. They asked me about demons and dark energy. And before I ask you about it, I'll give you my theory on this. See if it lines up. This planet has people on it that are already evil. I've interviewed a number of homicide detectives they've investigated serial killers. You'll hear it in previous podcasts. And just by the demeanor of a serial killer, 1 minute he's a normal guy, the next minute he snaps. And you could see there was one incident where the cop was talking to him about talking to a serial killer that he caught. And he mentioned the girl who got away, and he went from a normal guy to a predator in a split second. He was angry about her getting away. That's one idea. So whatever we are here transfers over. Now, the other thing, this planet's 4 billion years old. Who knows what lived here prior? We have no idea. We have no clue what roamed this earth billions of years ago. Because even things millions of years ago, the earth takes it in. You know, if we perish in a billion years, there might not be any trace of us other than some of the material items that would be well buried on the earth. So the energy that's running around that might be dark, we don't know what that is. No clue. Demons, I don't know if real or not. What I do know by everything, you know, from what I've read and from what I'm in all the people I'm interviewing, there's definitely spirits, no question. There's definitely an afterlife. Are there darker matters? I'm sure there are. I mean, look at the human race. We're a scary race. We really are. We don't even like each other, and there's evil amongst us. So I can only imagine what there is afterward.
See, I don't believe in hell. I don't believe in a devil, and I don't believe in evil spirits. And I explain that in depth in the Afterlife Frequency. We don't need a jerk with a pitchfork sticking us in the butt to motivate us to do negative things. That's what we have is the human ego, the byproduct of our mind. And ego can also be thought of as edging God out, because whenever you do something cruel or horrible to another person, it's not because you're acting out of love for that person. It's because you're acting out of a purely self-centered behavior. As far as the serial killers and the psychopaths, if you look at the structure of their brains, it is different than a normal brain. You know, it's kind of like in Young Frankenstein, there was the two brains, normal and Abby normal. You know, you look at a brain of a schizophrenic, and it is structurally different than a regular brain, because spirits are not evil or negative. They're pure energy. And even the spirits of negative people, when they come through, they retain the memories of what they did, you know, because these are identifiers, but they don't come through. They're not a psychopath. I think who you're talking about with the serial killer, I think that was Ted Bundy. There was one girl that claims she escaped, and maybe she did. And I watched, because I was a criminal defense attorney at the time, and we were watching the last interview with Ted Bundy, and you could see how he'd shift and get all evil and angry. But that's because he had a defective brain. Didn't mean he was stupid. He had a defective brain.
Right.
So this is where I do depart with other paranormal investigators and other mediums. I don't believe in demons, devils, boogeymen. That's here on Earth.
Right.
And hell, it does not exist, but it exists on Earth. And if you don't believe me, talk to a parent who has lost a child. That parent is in hell.
Yeah.
So that's my take on all of this.
I agree with that. I personally think Earth is a proving ground, right?
It is. It'd be nice if we could all, join hands and sing Kumbaya and turn, Earth into utopia. But because of the human ego, it's like, why does China need to do this massive buildup? Why does the United States need to do this? Why does Russia need to? Why does Vladimir Putin need to behave the way he does?
Right.
It's all about ego. Okay. And that's just a fact of living in the material world. I mean, it became very painfully clear to me in the practice of law that we're never going to evolve into a utopia. At least not in my lifetime.
Nor mine, I think.
Yeah, it would be nice if we
Right.
did. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try, because we grow in response to adversity. The other side, being in a purely energetic state. I had a near-death experience when I was 4. Okay, all the NDEers that talk about going into the light and the bliss and the love and the divine intelligence that, dare I say, we call God, that is fantastic. But that's not Earth.
Right.
Okay, this is the material world dimension. We're on a lower, slower vibration. Why? Because we can experience things here that you can't when you're pure energy. Pure energy, a pure EMS, a pure electromagnetic soul, doesn't get tired, old, sick, or die.
Right. The vessel breaks down.
Right, but here in the material world, our body does. And, I had an uncle that coped his whole life with cerebral palsy. It was my dad's brother, and Dad said that his life was hell. But you know what? That guy took lemons and turned them into lemonade. He made a good life for himself in spite of the cerebral palsy, not because of it.
Right.
And so I had the most amazing respect for him. So the thing is, we don't need demons and devils. And there's a lot of non-human spiritual intelligence that we encounter in paranormal investigations, and you got to be very careful about immediately assuming it's evil.
Right.
Yeah, I see that all the time on these goofy TV shows where they shake night vision goggles around and scream, David, David, David. And I watch this stuff and I'm like, I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah,
okay. And I've been on these investigations and I've encountered things that people, it's evil. And I'm like, wait, let's communicate with it. And it wasn't. It was an elemental, which is an intelligent entity. It's not human, never was. And it's a spiritual being that's more aligned either with animals or plants or earth, and they don't necessarily care about us.
Right.
Okay, it doesn't make them hostile. They're just on a different frequency. No, it's a demon. It's a demon. So stop demonizing everything. So that's the problem. People fear what they don't understand. People demonize things they don't understand. So that's part of the reason that I don't believe in the boogeyman.
I agree. I'll tell you what. So 2 parts. One, we said earlier about the brain being damaged. That makes sense because if your computer has damaged parts, it's not gonna perform adequately. So that makes sense. The other thing about the spirit being non-human, walk in the woods, find a grizzly bear, act like a jerk around it, see the outcome. You know what I mean? Same metaphor.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, and you can call that a demon all you want, because it will become one when you agitate it, period, right?
I was diving once. I was snorkeling off the Ile de Saint in the Caribbean. It's right near Martinique. And it was a beautiful coral reef. And I was snorkeling, and then all of a sudden I saw this octopus. Now, talk about something that's about as different from us as you could possibly be.
Right.
And it was a big one. I mean, its head was I mean, bigger than a softball. I mean, it was big. And, you know, I had this like stick. I mean, I wasn't hitting it, but I just like, you know, put the stick near it, and it was looking at me. And there was intelligence in this creature's eyes. It was summing me up and down, and I was not trying to harm it. I just like touched it, and then it came off the rock at me, and then I'm like, oh my God, you know. So I'm backing off, and it extended its tentacles, and it was easily 6 to 7 feet in diameter. I mean, this was a big octopus. And then I saw where it had come off the rock. It was a cluster of eggs. It was a female protecting her nest.
Huh.
And so I backed off, and I could see her looking me up and down. Like, I was looking like, this thing's as big as I am. And it's looking at me going like, this thing's as big as I am. You know? And then, like in a lightning flash, went back to the rock, covered the rock entirely, closed its eyes. I didn't know they could do that. And then changed to the color of the rock.
Yeah.
It was one of the most incredible things. And I had such respect for this, you know, because when I go into nature, I'm a firm believer, take only photographs, leave only footprints, which,
right.
You know, of course, in the water, it's like leave only splashes.
Right.
But there was an alien creature. Now, octopi used to be called the devilfish.
Huh.
Because it's weird looking.
Yeah.
It's got tentacles. It's like a liquid being. It doesn't have bones. But we now know it has the intelligence level of a cat, maybe more.
Probably more.
Yeah, probably more.
Yeah.
They problem solve. And the hard part is they don't live very long. They only live like maybe a year and a half, 2 years, which is a shame, because if something like that lived longer, and they do exhibit all sorts of intelligence. Do they have emotions as we understand it? Do they have a consciousness as we understand it? Maybe some of the spirits we encounter, maybe it's the spirit of an octopus.
Right, exactly.
Okay. You know, and maybe it doesn't when you interface with it. Maybe it doesn't feel all warm and cuddly, all right? But that doesn't make it evil. It doesn't make it a devil fish.
I watched one on a video manipulate a jar for the food content inside of it.
Yes.
I was blown away when I saw that. I was blown away. You know?
It figured it out.
Yeah. There's a little documentary on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it right now, but the guy.
My octopus
yes.
teacher.
Oh
my God.
I don't care how tough you are, you'll sulk. You will shed a tear watching that.
Yeah, you will. And it won an Academy Award, and it needed to, because it's important that, you know, we share this planet with a lot of other creatures. And I was just so depressed recently. The United States government announced that 23 species have just gone extinct.
Oh, my God.
You know, well, you know, I mean, I don't want to get all political.
Yeah,
but
I get it.
But, you know, we deforest, we pollute, we hunt to extinction. And, you know, there are things we can do to make some adjustments here and there to where we won't, you know, have to do those things. I wish everybody would listen to Sir David Attenborough and to Dame Jane Goodall. I really wish people would listen to them, because they've been on the front lines of studying these creatures in our environment for the past, 60, 70 years or whatever it's been. And they said, if you do this and this, you know, we can start turning things around. But anyway.
Well, that's a hope. I hope so, because that's a shame. I'm a big fan of nature myself, enormous one.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, me too. I appreciate it greatly.
And if I'd like to first off thank you and thank all of your listeners. And if people want to find out about signing up for a reading with me, and I invite everyone to sign up for my newsletter, please visit my website, which is afterlifefrequency.com, because if you sign up for my newsletter, it'll keep you up to date on all sorts of media events that I've got coming up. And you can also order my book, The Afterlife Frequency, which is available worldwide at all fine bookstores, Amazon.com, Google Books. It's everywhere. And that's all at my website, afterlifefrequency.com. Adam, thank you again. I really appreciate it. It was fun. Yeah. It felt like we were sitting at a coffee shop just.
And that's what I like, yeah. And all the information, I'll have links to it all in the description so that everyone knows exactly where to find everything. Mark Super. Anthony, it was amazing, and I plan to do it again with you, sir.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thanks.